So, hi everybody, I'm Suzanne Grossman. I direct Career Services for the Marxe School of Public and International Affairs. For those who don't know me, I'm with Samantha Bruno, who's our Career Services Coordinator. I just lost my light. And we're very happy to host Tony Scardino, who is joining us from Grant Thornton and their Public Sector Advisory Group, who's going to lead a presentation. Oh, and I see Elizabeth Bloom as well, who's also from Grant Thornton, our recruiting contact. So thanks for being here, Elizabeth. And
thanks so much.
Yeah, so Tony's going to lead us through the presentation, and we will have time for question and answer after, though he has suggested that if you have questions during his presentation, you can throw them out into the chat and we'll do our best to get to them as he goes along. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tony. So thanks again for being here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to be here representing Grant Thornton. 30 years ago or so, I was in your shoes. So I want to recognize that. And besides the fact that I'm getting old, I've got a history. I used my public administration degree for government service, as well as in the private sector, as well as the nonprofit world. And I'll go through a little bit of that. Hopefully this is an interesting dialogue exchange of potential information rather than you listening to me for the next 50 minutes or whatever it is. So please ask questions. I want to make sure that we're addressing questions you have. And this is not the end all and be all. You'll have contact information at the end for Elizabeth Bloom and myself. So you'll be able to reach us, ask questions, anything like that. So don't get hung up on the nitty gritty, but certainly let's talk about some more overarching concerns or questions you may have as we go along. So again, let me introduce myself. I'm Tony Scardino. I'm what's called a managing principal at Grant Thornton in the public sector side of the business. And I'll explain some of that. But for an icebreaker, I wanted to, since I'm not going to have a true dialogue here, I'm going to ask for, can anyone tell me who's going to win the Super Bowl this coming Friday? I'm sorry, this coming February. And the reason why I asked that is because it's going to be Buffalo, which is the only team that actually plays in the state of New York, right? I know you're all from New York and you think the Giants and the Jets play in New York, but anyway, so going back to the presentation, I wanted to explain why I am talking to you and from the sense of what we recruit as a public sector advisory company. We're looking for folks such as yourself that are problem solvers. I mean, that's what consulting is. It means problem solving. We have clients who need problem solved. It's as simple as that. Sometimes it's problems that they can't figure out for themselves, and sometimes they don't have the time or the resources to do it. So, you know, the professional services and advisory services for the government is a large industry, you know, ranging from, you know, the big DoD consulting firms, Lockheed Martin and things like that, down to a small women-owned business that could be 2 people just providing a specific service to the government. And there's a whole procurement process for how that's done in a fair manner. But once we get past that, my firm, our firm, I'm going to explain here. Here's our agenda for the day or the next hour. We're going to give an overview of public sector. I'm going to talk about the culture. And we're going to talk about recruitment. But what makes me qualified to have this discussion is that I came out of graduate school many years ago and I joined the government as a presidential management fellow. Went to the FBI, 2-year program. Many of you may be aware of it. I think it's starts next week in terms of the application process. It's a great way to join the government if that's what you are so inclined to do. I was in a class with about 200 other folks from all over the country, all from different public administration and some international programs, some law schools, but by and large, it's mostly public administration. And you can go work for any agency that's hiring PMFs. Not every agency does, but in theory, they're all eligible to do so. So I joined, went to the FBI, and had a great career. I ended up 24 years with the federal government. I worked for 5 federal agencies. But as you're learning from the fact that I worked for 5 different agencies, I like variety. And so I came to the consulting world about halfway through my federal career. And I worked for Grant Thornton actually in the 2005, 2006 timeframe. What I love about consulting is that you get variety by its very nature. You work across the government, working on several projects potentially, depending on how long you stay in this career. So right now, for example, I'm the managing principal for the Department of Justice as well as the Department of Labor. But then I also have responsibility for different projects at USDA, then the Department of Commerce, Architect of the Capitol. So it's a very wide-ranging career, typically, depending on, again, your level in the firm, and we'll go through the levels a little bit. But for me, it worked, right? I worked for 5 federal agencies as a federal employee, and then I've worked for more than that as a consultant. So I love the diversity and different experiences you'll have. So in the government, you get hired into a grade, and you get into a series. I was a budget analyst, so I did budget work for about 10 years. While as a consultant, you don't get hired into a particular field per se. You may have a background, let's say data analysis, and so we'd hire you to do some data analytics. But you could move around both functionally as well as at different government agencies need different services from us. So it's a different kind of field, and I just want to differentiate the two. They're both great careers, and I've done them both. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. I just want to help along the way over the next 40 minutes or so, give you some idea of how they differ. So again, 5 federal agencies, started my career as a presidential management fellow. And I worked for 2 consulting firms, and I worked for even an international nonprofit for 4 years. So I've actually can check all the boxes of public, private, and nonprofit. And they were all great. So I'm not, not going to say that one is better than the other. They're all just a little different. So, in our world, in the consulting world, advisory, we are for-profit, of course. So at the end of the day, while we're supporting government agencies, we need to make a profit to stay in business. Very different than the mission of a federal agency. The way I used to say, when I worked at the FBI, we didn't charge our criminals to investigate them, right? It's not how it works. So we didn't have customers per se, but many federal agencies do have customers, and we can go through that as well. Because I was the CFO at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and there we truly did charge people to get a patent or a trademark. So we had customers, and we did charge them money. But for the sake of this, I'm going to try to differentiate the two that way. So I spent a little bit of time on my role at Grant Thornton, but I also, another thing that I do is I lead a group of former government executives. So, consulting firms, or at least like ours, we have mostly folks that grew up in the consulting world, mostly, not all. And then a certain percentage of us have government experience. So the idea is that we complement each other. When you grow up in the consulting world, you learn how to be a consultant, and you probably know better than I do. You would after not that long doing it, because I didn't grow up as a consultant. I grew up in the government. But the theory is that I complement our career-long consultants because I've got the government experience. I've been in the shoes of our clients. I understand their language. I understand their pressures. So we've got a whole cohort of folks that I lead, and you'll see that on some of our slides in just a minute. So next slide. We're going to go through the public sector today. First, we're going to talk about Grant Thornton overall. We are in 135 countries, as the slide shows. We're about roughly a $6 billion operation. This is, again, you see where our footprint is. So Grant Thornton is, worldwide. And what we offer is tax, audit, advisory services, right? So obviously, companies need help with their tax. We audit many companies because we need to provide audit services. They need to be audited. And then advisory is consulting. So inside our advisory services, we're mostly our public sector, because most of the public sector services are advisory, but not all. We do some auditing. So if you think about the firm, roughly 10 to 15% of our firm is public sector in America. So if we've got 8,500 people in America, about 1,000 people in the public sector. And I'll show you that next. Here's where we are. We say that we have a presence in over 35 cities. We've really got about 50 offices nationwide, 50 plus, but in some cities we got more than one office. But you'll see here in the purple, that's where we have offices around the country. Pretty spread out, pretty wide, especially during the pandemic. We've got folks that are working in all different states, including ones where we don't even have offices. But we'll probably get to that in a little while here. Give you an idea of our clients. This is just a sample of our federal clients, right? So how does a consulting firm get a client? right? We have to usually bid on something. Through the procurement process, there is a competitive process where the government will put out what's called a statement of work. They'll say, we need this problem solved. And consulting firms like mine will then bid on the work. It gets a little more complicated than that. Sometimes they put it out as a set aside for small businesses. Sometimes it's for Native American companies. But when it's called full and open, that means anyone can bid on it, and we would bid on that work. So then these are our clients, which means we won work there. We were awarded contracts, and we provided services to them. This is just a sample of some of our clients, ranging from Department of Commerce to transportation, agriculture, DOD, meaning Navy, Army, everybody like that. DHS, there's 22 agencies in the Department of Homeland Security. We support the majority of them. And then we'll have smaller government agencies such as the Smithsonian, or the Architect of the Capitol, or the National Science Foundation. And what type of work do we do there? Here we go, services and solutions. Okay, this gives you the first 4 columns are your traditional management consulting services that we provide, right? Technology transformation, as you, I'm sure, are well aware, technology moves at such a fast speed, but the government doesn't always move at there's such a long, protracted budget and procurement process. The budget cycle in the federal government's 18 to 24 months alone. So if you can think of a project you want to get done, you have to go to Congress to get the money. It's going to take you a couple of years. Well, in the meantime, technology keeps you moving faster and faster. So firms like ours help agencies transform their operations, whether that's through business automation, whether it's through artificial intelligence, automating small things and what's called bots, right? That's some of the kind of the fancy automation right now. But technology transformation can be making something that's a manual process and just simply automating it, right? Or it could be replacing their IT systems. They're on an architect system that's old. We help them bring in newer technology, newer platforms. So that's part of what we do. And of course, there's financial transformation, which you can imagine we were traditionally a tax firm. Grant Thornton started in 1924, so almost 100 years old. We did start as a tax and audit firm, moved into advisory about 30 years ago. So financial transformation is a big part of our business, even back to the government. I was a CFO in the federal government, so it made sense for me to be involved with financial transformation. We help CFO offices through anything that, whether it's bringing in new systems, helping them be more efficient, business process improvement, could be helping them to automate things. Wherever they need they have challenges, we will help them. Then risk is a huge part of our business. Think about through the CARES Act or through all the money that's been provided by Congress to deal with COVID. There's been a huge amount of pressure on government agencies to get the money out fast. Because, think about unemployment insurance. People were unemployed. Well, the government had to step in, provided almost $800 billion in unemployment insurance. So there's always this inherent tension between the speed of getting money out and the quality. What I mean by quality, it's make sure it's going to the right people. There's no fraud involved. So we will help when it comes to risk. We will help government agencies protect themselves against fraud, design programs so that they are less risky, right? Risk mitigation. What would happen if you do have some kind of a breach? We can help you. So we'll write policies, procedures, we'll give them standards, best practices, because that's what consulting firms do. We see what goes on in most agencies because we support them there. So we're able to develop best practices and say, oh, if this thing worked, if this process or procedure worked at the Department of Interior, we could probably franchise it and use it over here at the Department of Transportation. That's the beauty of bringing in a consulting firm, because I could tell you, as someone who helped lead 5 federal agencies, it's hard to learn from yourself, right? You tend to do the same thing over and over as opposed to bringing in a best practice. Not impossible, but more difficult to do it on your own. And if you want to somehow correct some issues, or you just want to bring something to a better place, improve it. And that's a lot of operational organizational transformation. We help agencies transform the way they do business, right? Improving their business models, meeting the needs of today while thinking about where do they want to position themselves in 5 years, 10 years. Because as we talked about, technology moves so fast, Well, so do the skill sets needed to operate in a more advanced technological environment. So you take a dinosaur like me that came in the government in 1990, right? I don't have some of the skills that my 21-year-old son is going to bring into the marketplace when he graduates and hopefully comes off my payroll next May, right? So he'll have different skill sets than I'll have, and yet we both will be in potentially the same office space. So organizations have to figure out, how do you work with a 22-year-old, a 32-year-old, 42, 52, 62, right? People, there's no mandatory retirement in the government. So you could truly work with people in their 70s. Well, their skill sets may be different than folks that are just coming out of college or graduate school like you are. So how does the government transform that? How do they become the most optimal and most efficient organization they can? That's where we come in and help them. And then finally, the last piece is audit. Audit isn't a big piece of our public sector work, because if you audit an agency, you can't consult to them. So you kind of got to make a decision which one you want to be involved with. Since we have so many customers on the consulting side, we're not eligible to do much audit work. But we do have a couple of key clients that it's still a nice piece of our business in terms of it's important for us. And it does help us learn more about the audit process, because we will help a lot of agencies get prepared for their audit, right? So that's an important part too, because everyone has to go through an annual audit. So they oftentimes need help either preparing for it, or after the audit findings, you have to have something called a corrective action plan. How do you deal with the audit findings and make sure you don't have repeat findings the next year? So that's also a large part of our business. Next slide here. I already talked about this. We're one of the few firms that has such a large investment in what's called former government executives. I explained this, where we come from. I was squarely from the executive branch, but we folks from the military, White House. We also do state and local work, state and local government work. So we've got some FGEs from that part of the government, as well as the legislative branch, folks that work for Congress. So we put all of us together, which I do monthly. I coordinate a meeting, right? It's a great way for us, kind of call it like a homeroom. We're all together sharing ideas of how we can help the government operate better, because we all were in the government at one point. So how do we become qualified to do some of what we do? Well, part of it is understanding how government works. So we do many surveys and reports on what are some of the trends in CIO space. That's Chief Information Officer. CIO is in charge of all the IT for the respective government agency. Same thing about things like data. How are people collecting data? How are they storing it? How are they keeping it safe? And then how are they using it? Things like that. So we will collect information and then produce reports. So obviously we do it because we're trying to be thought leaders, thought capital, but we're also doing it because we're providing a service to the government. I head up our CFO survey. We survey CFOs around the government every year. Actually do it a couple times a year now. And we're trying to get feedback from them. What are issues and challenges that they're facing? So for instance, this last year, we focused on COVID funding. How are CFOs at the state, local, and federal government dealing with this huge influx of federal funding? Because like I said, there was pressure to get the money out the door very quickly. Well, when that happens, sometimes some agencies may have skipped a step or been in a rush, so that the quality may not have been there as much as they would have liked if they had more time. And sometimes the opposite happens, where agencies are so afraid that they're going to do something incorrectly because they were pushed to do it quickly, that they get frozen and they don't actually put the money out in a very timely manner. So we come in and try to help them eliminate the fraud, but also work in a timely manner. So I want to give you some idea of what Grant Thornton as an organization. Again, we've been around for almost 100 years, and we've gotten many awards throughout the years. These are recent ones where we really believe in, family first, right? It's a very, and I could tell you this, when I had, a 6-year-old son and I was working at Grant Thornton in 2006, very family friendly in that flexible workforce, right? You can work, and I know the pandemic's made it easier, but even before that, Grant Thornton was like, hey, you own your career. As long as you meet your objectives and you get things done, you can do it from wherever it makes sense. Now, sometimes a client requires you to be on site. because it's in the Intel space, and we can only do what we can do. But we'll work with you if you say, listen, I've got kids at home. I can't, work in an office environment every day and be gone 10 hours. We will work with you to accommodate it to the extent that we can. Sometimes we can't do it tomorrow, but we can certainly do it over a course of a couple months. So we've won many awards as best places to work. We're very proud of our identity and our brand. We have surveys taken, and we find that folks that have us as a client tend to give us really high scores. So that's really all we're going to. We can't necessarily expect great brand recognition from someone we've never supported before. But when we have worked for a client, whether it's in the government or in the commercial world, we get very high scores. So we're proud of that. So, the Grant Thornton difference, every firm, all the big four accounting firms, and we're the fifth largest, we compare and contrast, and we do similar work. We all do tax work, audit work, and advisory work. And then usually everyone's got a public sector. So what makes us different, right? Well, a variety of client engagements. And of course, the large firms have that, but if you go with a smaller firm, they'll have less variety. They may have 10 clients instead of the hundreds that we have. So sometimes you just don't have as much variety in your career. So we definitely afford that to folks. If you spend time with us, you're going to spend time on different client engagements. Helps you grow. It's good for the firm because your perspective is larger. So if you're on one client, you've brought the perspective of all the prior clients with you. So that helps with career development, right? Because again, I was in the government, and in the career development, there's like a hierarchy. It's like a pyramid. You start out at a certain GS schedule and you move your way up. And at the top, you become a manager or a leader, either GS 15 manager or an SCS leader. It's very hierarchical. In our business, this industry is not like that. It's not a hierarchy like that. It's like folks can get promoted at any point in time, and it has nothing to do with other people getting promoted. Like I used to say when I was a GS 14 in the government, I needed my boss, the GS 15, to leave. Otherwise, I couldn't get promoted into that spot. And there's no guarantees I get promoted anyway because there are other GS 14s. So it's a very different career progression in the government than it is in the private sector. I'm not saying one's better than the other, they're just different. I'm going to skip clearly one culture for 1 minute because I have a slide on that. Business resource groups are basically diversity groups. We have business resource groups for, as you can imagine, African American, Asian American, Hispanic American. These are groups that have things in common, or they want to promote the interests of those groups. So I'm in the Asian American business resource group, and I'm not Asian American, but I've worked with many, many, many colleagues that are Asian American, and I believe strongly in it and helping them succeed and advance. So I've done a lot of speaking and helping folks grow. I've done a lot of mentoring as well. Community involvement. Grant Thornton places a serious emphasis on this. We actually give folks time each year to spend in the community. We believe, again, we have offices in over 35 cities. We believe that we are an important part of the community for people to feel not just that they work for a job, work in a job and they go home, right? You're part of your community. We have responsibility. So we do all kinds of things from, green initiatives, even in our offices. We don't any longer have paper cups and things like that. Everything's glass and biodegradable and washable. So we believe that, being part of your community and giving back is an extremely important part. And then international secondments. This just means that because we're an international firm, there is a way for you to apply for jobs in foreign countries and have the opportunity to work overseas. But I want to go back to our clearly one culture because this is unique. Every firm's got its own unique qualities. This is us. It's called Clearly, CLEARR, and you can read what they are. But these are true values that we don't just give lip service to. Everyone goes to training when you first start with the firm, and there's continuous reminders of what our values are. So my point of this is we're not here just to make money. If you don't act with respect, we don't really want you to be part of our firm. It's just how we believe, you respect people that you work with as well as the people you work for. Things like responsibility, own your own actions. I've got people in my life that have worked for me in the past where they're always blaming someone for something. And I don't mean their dog ate their homework. I mean, it's, there's just people like, I'm sure you've worked with people like that before. we believe in everyone takes their own responsibility. Understanding that not everything is our fault by any means, but if you own your own actions, you can certainly get on the path towards remedying the situation. So similar with agility and excellence and leadership, we believe that you don't have to be in a leadership position to be a leader. Anyone can be a leader in any level of the company because you've got the opportunities. And when you're on a project, one of the other major things between the government that I noticed, between the government and a consulting firm, is you're typically in a position of managing at a younger age. Earlier in your career, you'll be in charge of certain aspects of a project. Usually a couple of years in, you're already got, you start as an associate, by a couple of years in, you're usually a senior associate, and you'll have associates working for you. Very different than in the government. I was talking about that pyramid. I didn't supervise anyone until I became a GS-15. I was already 8 years into my career. Now, I'm not saying that's better or worse, it's just different. So, fall recruitment, Elizabeth has asked me, of course, to share with you when we would like folks to apply. We've got actually going to hire folks in a couple different tranches. Winter of 2022, which means next February is when people would start, and then next summer, which is when more people start. For us, larger classes will have, you never really know. It all depends on how many people we hire, how many classes we'll have next summer. But the deadline is October 4th, which is coming fast. I think it's 2 weeks away, not even. And then we'll be doing virtual interviews the following week. So love to see as many of you as possible to interview, to apply. And then our job is to screen them quickly, your applications, and then get folks in for interviews. Because I'm not going to lie, all the firms are doing this at the same time, and we're all competing for the best talent. I'm sure all of you are very qualified. We would love to see your applications. I know this, my son is going through it right now. It's a fast and furious time. We try not to make the application process too onerous, and certainly the interviews are pretty quick. It's not going to be day-long interviews or anything like that. So please make the time. We would love to see your application. We'd love to get to know you a little bit better. Trying to think how do you apply? You go to this, we can also make this available, but you go to this website here, grantthornton.com, careers.aspx. And like I said, it's not a very complicated process, but this is the best way to do it these days. And then if you have questions about that, I don't know, take your phone out, take a picture if you want. Then you'll have email addresses for Elizabeth and I, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have, or more likely Elizabeth will be better at answering the questions than I will be. But if you ask me a question, I promise I will get it answered by someone who knows more than I may know about your specific questions. So that's kind of it for our full presentation, but I just wanted to get a couple of thoughts out there. Like folks often ask me, why does the government hire consultants? Like, why don't they just hire their own people? Well, the reality is, and again, I'm not criticizing because I've been in charge of hiring for a federal agency, government hiring takes a long time. It's a long process. Typical true story, we started a project with the Department of Labor earlier this summer. We needed 37 people. We brought them on board all over the country. We brought them on board in about 6 weeks. I don't think the government could even get the job postings out in 6 weeks. And I say that politely because I've worked for 5 federal agencies and I'm a big fan. It's just a much longer process hiring into the government. So the other advantage is if we get hired to a project like we did at the Department of Labor, once we've solved the problem, we're gone. When you hire government employees, they're hired, there's no end date. They can stay as long as they want, as long as they're doing good work and things like that. So really depends on what the challenge that the government has. Sometimes obviously they want to hire more people to get a job than it's going to be, the job's requirements for years and years and years. And other times it's a shorter term project and they're going to bring us on for 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever it may be. So just to give you some idea of why the government has so much in advisor service, because government spends billions and billions and billions of dollars a year on consulting services. Sometimes they're contractors. So sometimes they'll outsource. They'll have contractors come in and do work that government employees used to do. And sometimes it's more in the problem solving area. And that's where we tend to be. We don't really want to do some of the lower grade federal work that they've decided to outsource and say work. I'm not saying we would never do that, just almost never. We tend to do a little higher level consulting where we want to help the government solve a problem. And then once we're there, we build good relations with them and they'll ask us to solve more problems. And I say problems, maybe issues or challenges more than problems. We don't just come in to solve problems, but we do help them with some of the challenges that they inevitably encounter. And the CARES Act and the pandemic has caused many, many challenges for government agencies, even simple things such as what's the posture for coming into work? What are policies and procedures? When will they come into work? What about their office space? Can they downsize at all? We'll come in and do analysis to try to help them figure that out. So, in a nutshell, if you are comfortable delving into the unknown, because every time you're on a new project, you're not necessarily sure what to do. You now got new people you work for, different agency, you got to learn the mission. Then you might like consulting if you like the variety. The other nice thing about consulting is you're owners of your own career. You typically have just one boss for longer than a year because you move around different projects, you've got different bosses. And there's usually advantages to that because you learn different styles and you become very nimble. But to some people, they don't like as much. When I went to work at the FBI, I stayed in the same office for 7 years. I had the same phone number, same desk. It's a different, I'm not making that sound bad. I loved it. I'm just saying it's a different kind of career. I think that's pretty much all I've got in terms of prepared thoughts. I'm hoping we have a dialogue now. People feel free to ask questions and happy to try to answer your questions. If I can't, either Elizabeth or I can get back to you very quickly with the answer.
Thanks so much, Tony. We really appreciate that overview. I think you gave a great picture of Grant Thornton and the public sector advisory section. There were a couple of questions so far, and I think also I had a prior conversation with Elizabeth about exactly what you're recruiting for in these recruitment cycles, which I think kind of varied versus like we have some students or recent graduates who have a lot of work experience already. And I guess the question is like, who's in this pipeline for the fall recruitment and how should people with more experience apply? So that's a question. I don't know if that's for Tony or Elizabeth. And then there was a question about training and onboarding period for new hires. And I'll get to the international. I don't know if you saw that, Elizabeth, about international students. Whoever wants to take all of those.
So yeah, I'm going to start and ask Elizabeth to give the more official response. But in terms of folks with experience, we hire people at all levels. We don't just hire people with coming out of college or graduate school. We definitely, depending on whether you've got consulting experience or not, you may be what's considered an experienced hire, or whether you're not and you're transitioning and where you have work experience, but not consulting experience. As you can imagine, then you're changing industries. So I came in when, after 10 years in the government, I came in the consulting world. I had work experience, but I didn't have consulting experience. So, again, we bring all kinds of folks in, but I'm not sure exactly what we're recruiting for right now. So maybe Elizabeth can help with that.
Yeah, no, just to go off what Tony just said, the positions that we had on the previous slide, I take care of the campus hires. So most likely people, if you have a lot of consulting experience, these roles are very entry level for people like Tony mentioned who are switching into the consulting industry, or perhaps you've went through undergrad or doing your master's and now you're looking for your full-time job. So that's what these positions are. If you do have much more experience, you've been in the consulting world before, you would actually go through a different process than the one that I am leading. And in that case, I'm happy to put you in touch with our experienced hire recruiters. There's a separate team who takes care of that, and there'd be separate job postings that would be available on our Grant Thornton Careers website.
So just to be crystal clear, so if someone has a lot of experience, but it's not consulting specifically at a consulting firm, they could still go through this process you're talking about.
Yes, exactly.
And what about the question about the, let's see, it was from Jennifer. Would you be willing to talk about the training onboarding period and what that looks like for new hires?
Can you do that one?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can start. So, one thing is when you start with us, you'll go through a formal orientation and you will go through training. And one of the things I like to tell all our students is we can teach you those hard skills. We can't teach you the soft skills as much. So coming in the door, you all are coming from, excellent universities, you have that foundation. We'll give you, if you're going to be using a platform or a program that you're not necessarily as familiar with, we do give you the training on the job. So you don't have to worry about that. And then in terms of just, having the resources that you need, you're going to have your team to be able to ask questions to. We also do have a very strong mentorship program. So coming in the door, you'll have access to what we like to call a buddy. So that's someone who was a hire and has been at the firm for about a year or two, someone who you really can ask those day-to-day questions. And then you'll also have a coach. So someone who is, a manager or a senior manager who will be able to help you through any feedback that you receive on your client engagements and just to talk about your overall trajectory with the firm. So in terms of the training that comes that way, again, asking questions on the job, a lot of it is, I think, once you get into it, you'll have more of a sense of what you know and what you don't know, but you don't have to worry about coming in and not knowing a platform or something like that. We will take care of all of that.
So if I could add something, and it's not directly on this question, but I think it's important to add. Grant Thornton being a CPA firm, we have a requirement for continuing professional education. Everyone that works for Grant Thornton that's externally facing throughout the firm has a requirement to, I think it's 120 credits over 3 years. And while that may seem like, a box you have to check, right? Because it's a requirement for compliance. I personally think it is a great way to keep abreast of any new skill sets, information, trends. So, most government agencies also try to do this, but they don't have that hardcore requirement. So you have to see if there's training money involved, and if you can take the time off of work, not time off of work, but they basically say you don't have to work and you go to training kind of thing. And ours is literally a requirement. You have to do it. So, and all the CPA firms will require that. But it's not training like you're talking about when you first start. But my point is it's a learning institution. You're going to continue to learn throughout your career. Do we work with U.S. or government international governments? We do, for sure. But again, remember, there's the public sector, and we tend to support federal clients and state and local. So we wouldn't normally support a international government. Not that we've certainly done that before, but we've got member firms throughout the world, and they would typically probably in country. It's just more efficient for them being. So we've got a branch in the UK. So if we had a British client, then it would typically be that office that would support them.
Mm-hmm. And this goes hand in hand, Suzanne. I know you mentioned that someone's first question about, do we hire international students? So, through, in this process for campus hires, we do not sponsor any international students. They do need to be, and in terms of public sector, getting the background checks and everything, they do need to be a U.S. citizen. So that is something that if they are an international student, might not necessarily have that same opportunity.
All true.
Are there
folks have been in your shoes? I know where you're coming from. Please ask questions.
Any other questions? I think Elizabeth and we talked about this in terms of I know, Tony, you said that there's a lot of offices around the country. Most of our students are based in New York, but some are not because we have a lot of remote classes now. Is there a preference for folks being in the Arlington or DC metro area for hires?
So that's a great question. And unfortunately, I don't have like one answer. I can give you about 5 answers. And what I mean by that is, it's the whole world's evolving. Like, you read about all the folks, all the companies, on the West Coast there, they, with big campus, they said, you're going to come back in October. And then that's stretched out. We're like every other company. We're trying to figure out what makes the most sense. What are people most comfortable with? So we say that our offices are open, but you don't have to come into the office. So they're open. Like I was in our office yesterday because I needed to see somebody who was in from out of town. It made sense to meet there. But what we're not asking people to do is just come into the office and do what they would do from home. If you're going to be on your computer on Teams meetings or Zoom meetings, you don't need to come in the office for that. So that does help us have a remote workforce that's all around the country. So we do have people that are scattered around the country working for projects that typically would be DC based. Now, having said that, in the Intel space, the FBI is one of my clients. They require people to be on site a couple of days a week. So it really sometimes depends on the project you're on, the client that you have, what you're doing on the project sometimes. But by and large, things are definitely more remote than they used to be. But it's hard to say where we're going to be in a year, 2 years, 5 years. Typically, consulting tends to be that unless you need to be on site, you might as well be home. It's just something you can do. You have the freedom to do. But some people don't like to be home. They want to be in an office. So we want to be truly flexible to what the workforce requires and what they want. To be honest with you, we've got the office space. So if the folks want to come in, we can accommodate that. But we also, with all of our technology, we made it, for 18 months, I have not worked in the office. I was in the office yesterday for a meeting, but I've not truly brought my laptop in and done any work in the office in 18 months. And, still gainfully employed. They haven't fired me yet. So I'm getting my work done. So the point of that is, with technology, the way it keeps moving, we're going to get more and more capabilities from home, not less. I don't know if you want to add anything, Elizabeth.
Yeah, no, that was great. I will mention, if you do go online, you look up the postings, you'll see it's the office location attached to these is Metro DC. So, that is the bulk of our public sector is based out of this area. But like Tony said, there's, we can only imagine how much more is going to be changing in the next year or two. So, we will remain flexible with that. So I think he did a great job explaining it, but most of the public sector is based out of this area. So if that helps when you're looking at the postings and you see the location.
So, about travel expectation, we're working on a project. It's a great question. We do surveys of our clients. We ask them, do you want us on site? Over 80% say no.
Yeah.
It's just, the numbers have just changed. People are just, we've proven that we can get the job done with Zoom calls, team calls, things like that. I'm not saying you're never going to have to travel. Just saying the travel requirements are definitely less than they used to be. Now, will business travel ever swing back to what it was pre-pandemic? Most people say no. If you talk to the airlines, they're saying, in 5 years, probably, hopefully, because they have a vested interest. I don't see it coming back to what it used to be. And for that matter, in the public sector, we didn't do as much travel as the commercial side anyway, because not all of our clients, but most of our clients are in the DC area. Now, having said that, the government is obviously around the country. So we do have requirements to be sometimes other places, but we've got offices in other places too. So it truly is a nationwide workforce.
And this is a great question. I saw it come in about, for recent graduates or concurrent students who are graduating next year apply. So this coming cycle is only full-time associates. So people who are graduating either this December, who want to start a few months after, or people who are graduating in May 2022 and who can start right after that. We aren't holding an internship program this summer, which might be something that will come back in the future. So if you're a junior or a senior going on to do a different master's program, that's something you can consider. But anyone coming out of these master's programs, or if you're a senior in undergrad, you can apply to the full-time roles.
And what makes someone a competitive candidate? I'm sure you get a lot of applications, and what are you looking for? Certain kind of experience, skills, like if you're comparing, say, other people coming out of master's programs with each other, what would make you say yes or interview someone versus maybe pass on someone?
So I'll let Elizabeth speak after I do. My thoughts on that, and I think she alluded to it, is there's some skills you just can't teach as easily. We have clients. So people skills are something that we look for tremendously. Harder, more technical skills, we can teach that. But a consultant really is someone that's got the ability to build relationships. So that's with your peers as well as with your clients. And, it's maybe a dirty little secret, but our job is to grow our business. So we need people that can gain the trust of our clients or prospective new clients and build our business. So it's not exactly like sales, like you're door-to-door selling vacuum cleaners, like back in the old days, but you are representing the firm at all times, and people are going to think about Grant Thornton when they think of you. So we do need people with good people skills to represent the firm. Having said that, some specific projects, we do need some harder technical skills, folks that are comfortable with data and all that. But again, those are usually teachable. Elizabeth, I don't know if you had anything else.
Yeah, I think starting at, just in terms of the resume, because I know I'm sure several students here are thinking, what on my resume can I do? And especially to just get in the door that way, just take a look at the job posting, see the types of descriptions we give to it, the different qualifications and expectations we have for the role, and kind of really threading the needle with some of those concepts in your resume when you're giving us, your bullet points under the experiences. That's just something to think about to any job you apply to, is just really kind of tailoring it that way. Otherwise, it's to what Tony was talking about. Students who come to, something like this, once, I as a recruiter start to have touch points with you all, I can put, a face to the name, that's really helpful. That really shows your interest. If you do apply, sending me an email, letting me know you've done so, that really sets you apart. You're taking that extra initiative to reach out to us, to ask questions. And then the interview process is really, are you a fit for our culture? Do you align with our core values? Tony had that slide on our clear values, and that's something that we hold every candidate up to those standards. So we're looking for people who really align with that as well, and who we think would be an excellent fit on our teams. And the same on your side, you want to know, as you're going through the process, that you feel kind of that gut feeling of, is this firm right for me? Can I see myself working alongside these people? So a lot of the interview process is looking at those softer skills, of course, hearing about your experiences and your background, but again, just really getting to know you as a person.
Agreed.
Elizabeth, you had shared there was a date coming up for one-to-one, I don't know, coffee chats, or is that still happening?
So it is. The deadline closed. Well, it's going to close shortly, but I'm happy to, if any students reach out, I can set you all up. So we were doing virtual one-on-one coffee chats. If you had any questions and you wanted to talk to another professional for about 15 minutes, if you are still interested, I know Tony gave a great overview, but if you just had more maybe questions personal to, your own experiences or, anything like that, happy to set you up with one of our professionals for you to talk to. Just go ahead and send me an email. I put it in the chat box. I know Suzanne will circulate it, and I can make sure you have that opportunity as well.
And Jennifer was asking about the contact information for experienced hire. Is that something you can share, or should she email you about that?
Yeah, I can share that. Actually, it might be easier, Suzanne, if I send it to you. But let me get back to you. I'll make a note of it though.
Okay. And sorry, if I think this might have been covered, but there's like a recruitment cycle for the fall. Is there one for the winter also? Am I remembering that right? Do you do some hiring?
Yes, depending on how our process goes this fall, we do typically also hire again in the spring recruitment season. So we'll come back around. So that'll be, we're looking to fill the February class now, but if we still have hires for the summer class that don't get filled this fall, that's when we'll be on campus again in early next year.
Great. Any last minute questions? This is your chance. Like people are probably.
Not your last chance, because you have our contact info, but this is your last chance to live.
True.
Yeah.
We've I'm sure things are percolating with folks. So it's such a terrific opportunity, and yeah, we're really grateful for just being able to hear the depth of what you have to offer. Question, a reminder on the deadline, and can I send out the PowerPoint, Elizabeth? Is that okay to share that? You sent it to me, but I don't know if you were. I know we have the recording, but.
Tony, as long as you're comfortable with those slides.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no problem at all. Feel free to circulate that. And the deadline is October 4th. So that'll be in the slides as well if anyone needs that reminder.
Okay.
Coming soon.
I know.
Love to see some applications coming in.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. And thanks again, Tony and Elizabeth, for your time. So grateful to have you here today. I'm excited to follow up with the students, and there were a number of people, probably double the number, who couldn't make it, but RSVP'd, so they'll get the recording as well, and you might get some more influx of questions and applications. Sure. Yeah, so absolutely. Thanks everybody for being here. All right.
Thanks everybody for your time.
Thanks so much, Suzanne, for setting this up, and so nice for all of you to join us. So thank you again.
Appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a good day. Take care.
Bye-bye.